All right, Tar Heel Nation, we're back. And this is the end. This is the last podcast. We're ending it here. I'm done. Finish it up. Blake, Gil, take it over. It's all yours. How you guys doing?
Good, man. How you doing? It doesn't sound too good.
This is the day, right? This is the day that nobody. Well, I shouldn't say that. This is the day that everybody's been asking for, but hopefully, in real sense, nobody wanted to happen, right? Gil, I don't know. Was my message to you? That was when you found out?
That was when I found out. Yep.
And first reactions here.
Shock. And then, yeah, is this an April Fool's joke? No, it's for real. Because I've been trying to do a little Twitter purge, but then I had to get on, and then the first thing I see is from Armando Baycott. This is no April's Fools, so I knew it was for real. And it's just like it's monumental. I don't even know. It's monumental. I'm still processing it, and it's like one of those things where it's like, where were you when? I'll remember this forever. When Dean retired, I lived for Dean Smith. He was my idol, but I was still young enough to be like out in the world and not really paying attention. Today, it was like all I could think about.
Well, and the access is completely different now. We didn't have the social media. We didn't have the press conference. It was the TV shows there at, I think if I remember, I was too young to kind of remember. It was like when I was starting to follow North Carolina basketball, and I believe if stories, I didn't hear any of it, but like it had leaked out. The national press had kind of put it out there, but really you only saw what people videoed at the press conference. We didn't have all this live stuff here. So Blake, you had known, I kind of double checked to make sure it wasn't an April Fool's joke when I texted you, but when you found out, kind of initial reactions and how it interrupted your day.
Yeah, like I said to you guys, I was shocked but not surprised, and I guess that means that in the moment, it took me, it kind of took me by storm because just the way that things had been, it's not utterly surprising because the game has changed, and the madness of the NCAA transfer portal, I think, is huge, especially for coaches like Coach Williams, Mike Krzyzewski, Jim Boeheim, Tom Izzo, these guys that have been in the game for a long time, and they were coaching at a time where, when the going got tough, the tough got going. And if things were hard, you persisted. And you might have a guy like Denzel Valentine, if you're Tom Izzo, that maybe at the beginning he wasn't great, but by the time he got done with Michigan State, he was a very good player. He's a National Player of the Year candidate and things like that. Or in the case of Roy Williams, a guy like Tyler Zeller, he battled through 2 years of injuries and sitting on the bench a lot to become ACC Player of the Year. And we could go on and on and on. And this isn't to say that guys are wrong for going to be in the best situation for them. I described it today to somebody as, I'm not going to judge their choice to better their lives. College basketball for them is like a job interview, or it's like a test run. If they blow it and they don't do the best that they can do and be in the best position that they can for those 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it may be, maybe they don't make it to the NBA. And it's really a once in a lifetime type of thing. So I can't fault them for doing that. But having said that, I absolutely understand where these older coaches, but in particular, are at when you're facing potentially, a handful of transfers in one off season, a guy that you spent a ton of time recruiting, and you were, just emphatic about, getting him on the team, and then super excited once he committed to the team. Now he's gone. It's a lot, and the thing that saddened me the most was watching, Roy Williams say that. He just hadn't done a good enough job, and that, he's not the right man for the job anymore. And almost being apologetic to North Carolina fans. And that to me was very telling of the kind of person that he is, and a testament to him, but also of the times that we're in right now, and very saddening to me.
Yeah. So in case anybody that clicked on this video has no idea, lives under a rock, whatever, got here by accident. Roy Williams, the coach of North Carolina basketball, retired today. And I was just gonna, we're gonna start by kind of where you ended there, Blake, and just kind of admiring the person that Roy and the coach that Roy is. 48 seasons as a basketball coach, 903 wins, Hall of Famer, of course, 3 national championships, all at North Carolina. He has 79 tournament wins, NCAA tournament wins, 485 wins at North Carolina, 3 ACC tournament titles, 2-time AP Coach of the Year, 9 ACC regular season titles in 18 seasons at North Carolina. When he leaves here, he's either tied or in the lead for the most NCAA tournament wins, Final Fours, national title games, and national championships in the time that he was at North Carolina. So in those 18 seasons, he's either tied or in the lead of tournament wins, Final Fours, title games, and national championships. And it was really hard. I agree that hearing, that he felt like he's letting our fans down, especially, for us that follow it and are on Twitter or message boards or wherever, all this Fire Roy stuff and, the things that are said about him, to kind of hear him talk through his feelings of how it felt like he thought he was letting us down and he wasn't the best man for the job it was definitely hard to hear. And yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I don't know. I don't know. What was did you watch it, Gil? Did you see it? I know you asked where to find it.
Thankfully, I was watching. I had to catch the first bit on my phone on the drive home, but that was just the Chancellor and Bubba Cunningham, and so I made it into the house to watch the press conference with Roy. Just soaked it in. I'm going to be straightforward. My second cry of the day. What a class act. Just, everything that you just said. I mean, just let that sink in. All those statistics, particularly his time at UNC and what he has meant to not only the basketball program, but the university and the greater, Tar Heel Nation and family. It's just, it's crazy that, some people, all they know Carolina basketball is under Roy Williams. And that's fantastic. Some of us have known that family lineage kind of get passed to him, but he held that candle brighter than even ever before, really. And he's just unforgettable. So many things that he just did for the program. It's remarkable. And, I had to leave after watching the press conference and I came home. And the first thing my wife said to me was, Roy Williams is a really smart man. And we were kind of processing it together a little bit. And she said, I think he knows that he's getting out at the right time for him, just ahead of the curve. And we talked a little bit about, the Walker Kessler situation. I think that the way that he built a program, you might not be able to do that now. Essentially, I don't think that you can. I think that he realized that. And after the 2017 national championship, he knew that there was going to need to be a rebuild, and he was starting to put those pieces into place. And then you can't keep those pieces in place like you used to be able to. And so he's like, I'm a relationship man. I build family. As much as I win games, it's about developing players and about building those relationships. And I'll be able to do that more in this different role, perhaps. But yeah, I think one of the things that touched me and kind of really pulled at my heart was him saying like he's kind of afraid now, or scared, I think was the words that he used about, like the next steps, because he's just so used to going to work. And that's what he lived to do. That was his passion. So obviously, hope that he's gonna continue to leave his fingerprint on the program. But man, he's left an indelible mark for sure.
Yeah, and we'll kind of talk about what to go next, but before we ever get to anything like that, you kind of hit on the Walker Kessler stuff, and Roy said kind of his joy was building the teams and stuff like that. I know he was asked, and he kind of talked about why he left. Blake, do you have any other speculation? Do you think there's more than what he kind of talked about there, or he kind of admitted to? He kind of said other things confirmed it, but you think this last 2 weeks of the portal that you were talking about before, and stuff going on is kind of what pushed him over the edge?
I think it was a slow burn of the last couple of years, but I do think that this past couple of weeks was really the straw that broke the camel's back. I think, and Roy Williams mentioned this, that he had actually considered calling it quits after the 2020 season, but the reason he didn't was because he didn't want to walk away with that 14-19 record being the sort of bookend of his time at UNC. And one of the things that he said for many years was that he was never going to leave the North Carolina basketball program in a situation where it was in crisis mode, like it was when Matt Doherty was fired and when he took over in 2003. Now, truly, in hindsight, if he wanted to do that, best case scenario, he retires April 5th, 2017, and he walks away as a champion. But he wasn't done. He wanted to come back. He felt like he still had some coaching in him. As it turns out, 2018 was a decent year. The 2019, guys had a shot, but then things went sharply downhill. He thought Kobe White would be around longer. That didn't happen. 2020 was just a disaster. Obviously, injuries and a number of things. And I've said more than once that injuries weren't the only thing that kept 2020 from being a good year. The team didn't play well. They didn't mesh all that well. I think a lot of the pieces were very good individual pieces, but not necessarily together. And Williams today even said that he felt like he had made some mistakes coaching. That there were 6 games that were decided by one possession or less, or 3 points, 2 points, or 3, whatever, and that they had lost all 6 of them. And he felt that some of those were his fault. At one point, he said he didn't remind the guys to foul, and things like that. So I think there was a collective, fault. I don't think it was just one thing or one person. But I do think that this was sort of the last thing for him, watching a 5-star player who has a ton of potential walk away from the program, who, by all accounts, the way it sounds, he didn't really want to leave, but it sounds more like his father wanted him to get out of Dodge. I'm sure that was very disheartening. And, in losing in the fashion that he did for the 3rd consecutive loss in the NCAA tournament had to be bad too. I mean, 61 combined points over the last 3 NCAA tournament losses. I mean, they're not even getting close to winning games in the tournament at this point. When they lose big. And for one reason or another, I think that he felt it was time to call it quits. And I do think that there's a portion of truth when people say that the game has passed him by. I think he acknowledges that, and I think he agrees with that. And to a certain extent, there's a lot of coaches in college basketball right now that it has passed them by. Now, whether they're okay with that and they're carrying on and moving forward in the same way, that's a whole different thing. I don't think that Coach K is likely to change a whole lot of his strategies at this point. I don't think Jim Boeheim's going to go and change everything. Izzo, those same guys, Huggins, these guys have been coaching for 30 years. I don't think that they're going to change things. So if they don't, I don't know where they end up. Some of these guys can continue to get 5-star recruits, and maybe that's okay. But then look at this year. A lot of these guys had 5-star recruits, and it didn't really turn out well.
Yeah. So a lot there. I don't know what else do we need to say about Roy Williams here before we jump into, of course, what everybody else is talking about going forward. Gil, you got?
I think what Blake was saying, Roy is honest. I think a lot of times what Roy says, you can take it face value. And I think that's exactly what he laid out there today in his press conference, was owning responsibility. We're all human. He's human, and he admitted to making mistakes, particularly in 2020. And all of us in the fan base can see that he's not perfect, but that's why we love him all the more. And I think he owned up to the fact that it's time for someone else to lead this program, and it's going to be a hard transition for those out there that kind of wanted this transition sooner. You're gonna experience it now, and you're gonna see what it's like, to have different leadership. But I think that Roy was just straight up about it. And so again, I have mad respect for that. Class act.
And the thing that I will say though is that I disagree with the people who have tried to push and get him out and make him feel as if he owes an apology. He doesn't owe anybody an apology. Right. If anything, it's a debt of gratitude that people owe to him. He even mentioned, over the last 18 years, more national championships than any other program. And, the amount of wins and the Final Four appearances. I mean, there's 5 Final Fours in there too. And, they're you can never say for sure what would have happened, but, they're like a shot or two away from potentially a 4th title. When Marcus Page ties that game up and then Chris Jenkins comes down and hits that miraculous 3. They didn't win the most games during that 18-year span, but they're up there in the top 10, and they won, the last game of the season more times than anybody else. So that was the most hurtful thing, him thinking that he had done something wrong or that, he owed an apology to anybody. I think he was, over the course of his career, he's been absolutely just class in every sense of the word. I think he's handled any bit of adversity that's come his way with class, including the NCAA investigation, sticking it, with it through that, and then even winning a national title, at that sort of the, end of that era, everything he's done and always, dissimilar from some of the coaches, even in his own league, he always takes the blame for everything, and he never takes the credit, ever takes the credit. And today's press conference was absolutely the same. It was him taking the blame for the last 2 years and saying that it was his fault and putting nothing else on anyone else but himself. Just a great person and a great coach.
Yeah, and that obviously weighs on you, especially when you've had the last 2 seasons we've had when they're not as good. It weighs heavier on you. And I think too, you guys were kind of alluding to it, but like the honesty he has, and a lot of coaches out there are promising kids stuff that they don't deliver or can't deliver. And he just doesn't do that. And then also, the team building that he talked about, the relationships that he has on these kids, when kids start leaving and he's put all those time and that effort into them, it weighs on him. And I think, it just gets really heavy. So I asked in the chat kind of the best Roy Williams memory. So we got a couple of them here. You Can't Handle the Truth podcast says there's too many, but we always remember giving Meeks the hug after the block and the steal against Gonzaga to win the 17 championship. 300 here says the best coach ever, got 3 chips. What a feeling, especially 17. Well, thank you, Roy, for giving me a feeling a lot of people never felt. For me personally, the first North Carolina game I ever went to, I was in college. And me and some buddies from college took a trip to Ohio, and they played Cleveland State when it was Jawad's like going back home game, since he was from the Cleveland area. They played Cleveland State, and before the game, one of my buddies that was with me was a KU fan, and this was I think it was his first year at North Carolina. It was the year before they won the 2005 championship. And so he had a KU hat on, my buddy did, and I had a North Carolina hat. And I got closer up to Roy. I think we were pregame yet. The team was warming up and stuff. But I got closer, so that my buddy handed me his hat. And so I handed him a KU hat and a North Carolina hat to autograph. And he, of course, ate it up in front of all these North Carolina fans. He's, oh, my favorite 2 hats here. And I had to kind of shy away from, like, that's not my KU hat. Like, don't look at me and stuff like that. But, just the, like you guys said, down to earth person he is. Like he doesn't feel like he's, the multi-millionaire, head of the North Carolina, one of, if not the top job or program in the world as far as college basketball goes. Just, down to earth. I know somebody tweeted out pictures of him taking pictures and autographs before he left the Dean Dome today. And, obviously speaks to the type of person, the type of guy like you were talking about. So Tar Heels and Kick says his best memory was when Roy accepted the job. We got another one. Best memory is the pink blazer dancing at late night with Roy and giving forehead kiss to Kenny Williams that he kind of alluded to today as well. The picture on his desk. 300 says his best Roy memory. Every time he screamed, "Come on!" and pump. I mean, I think we can all see that, right? He gets down in his stance, pumping his fist like, "Come on!" Let's see here. Lori says loved when Roy would throw his blazer, the passion and the intensity.
He tried to rip it too.
Yeah, the time he tried to rip it. I don't know. What about you guys? I'll let you jump in here.
I have a couple thoughts. So I'm glad there's been a couple mentions about his blazer. mad points for style today. Probably not getting enough publicity, but he was looking really good in that jacket and that tie. That was a hot tie that he had on. And I was just thinking about him dancing with the players after victories. Like they're waiting on him after the press conference, and then he comes into the um, into the locker room and just dancing with the players. That's one of the things I'll always remember about Roy. So that's what I wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I never forget when him and Tyler Hansbrough embraced. Just moments after the the bell had sounded in that 2009 championship game, and like Hansbrough just comes up and throws his arms around him, and you could just tell that there was this mutual love and respect between the game's best player and a guy that was clearly on his way to becoming, at least during this era, the game's best coach, and building that relationship over 4 years. And the final game for Hansbrough was, the second, ring for Roy. Just that moment was so great. And another one that I always remember was when Marcus Page gave his senior night speech. Not just the things that Marcus Page said, but the reaction that Roy Williams had to those things, and that you could just tell that he was so affected by the way that Marcus Page felt about him, and the admiration that Page had for his coach, and you could just feel the emotion in that moment, and just the way that he's built relationships, and I think that it speaks volumes when all these former players reach out just immediately. And we're talking about generations of players, not just recent players. We're talking about players from his days as an assistant coach. We're talking about players from his days as a Kansas coach, which now has been 2 decades. Just the lives that he's affected and impacted, and the way that people love him for it is just amazing to me.
I watched that senior speech, Marcus Page senior speech, twice today, and that's what brought me to tears the second time watching it. And I came back into the room where my wife was, and I was like, you have to watch this. You have to watch this. And there's the relationship between the two of them, and I'm going to use the word adoration and respect, and the eye contact that they were both making. I said to my wife, I said, there's something so pure about that he was a mentor for that young man, and that young man acknowledges it and realizes how much that he has changed his life. And I think there's so much BS in this day and age, and that we all deal with it, and a college head coach deals with a ton of it. But Roy was no longer willing to deal with all that, because it's those relationships and moments like that where he's had that significant of an impact. That's why he got into coaching. That's why he loved it.
Well, even a guy like PJ Hairston, who people haven't really thought about for a while now, put out on social media today, like, what an impact Coach Williams had on his life, and that even through his mistakes, Coach Williams never gave up on him, and just how much he appreciated, the relationship with him, and what he had done for him.
Yeah, I saw, and then another one I saw too was JP Tokoto, who kind of left a year early without being undrafted, but still that I say same respect. I don't know, we didn't have the same speech as Marcus Page, but has that respect just like that for his coach. And I don't know. It's hard to transition away from this stuff, and I know this is the time where you want to dip out, Gil, but we're not going to let you. I've been kind of thinking about today too, like, how weird is it the next time we watch Carolina basketball on TV, or if fans are allowed to be in the Dean Smith Center, whether it's at an actual game, whether it's at Late Night with Roy, which isn't going to be anymore. But how weird is it going to be the next time we watch Carolina basketball that Roy Williams won't be on the sideline? I know for a ton of fans, like, he's, like Gil said, the only person they know. He's been there their entire lives. I went through the Doherty years, the 8 and 20 year. It was kind of right at the transition from Dean to Bill Guthridge when I really got into watching them, and and cheering for him and stuff. So I've seen other people there, but I mean, the last 18 years, that's all we know is Roy Williams on the side. So how weird is that going to be to see somebody else there? But that kind of brings us into what next? Where do we go from here? There's all kinds of names that have been thrown out. I think one of the first ones I saw this morning was Shaka Smart, who just signed a deal for Marquette. Like, I don't think that's even a possibility if he wanted to, and I don't know that we necessarily are going, jumping and throwing money at him anyway. So Blake, we'll kind of start with you since you've been covering this all day. You don't have to name names if you don't want to, but just kind of like, what do you think? And again, you said you watched Bubba's press conference and there wasn't much there, but kind of what's your feel of where we go from here? Or maybe what do you want to go from here? We can start there maybe.
Well, we're going to run long tonight, but Shaka Smart's never going to happen, so you can write that down for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that he found a new job. Nobody really wants Shaka Smart in Chapel Hill. What did he prove in Texas that would make anybody want him at
right.
Arguably the best coaching job in college basketball?
Well, and here's another one, 300 throughout Stackhouse. I've seen Jerry Stackhouse thrown out, but I mean, he's done nothing at Vanderbilt. I don't get where people are coming with Jerry Stackhouse, but again, I'll let you keep going here.
So let's talk about Jerry Stackhouse. So we put out a list of potential coaches today, and Stackhouse was one of them. So what I would say to the people that are criticizing Stackhouse for his couple of years at Vanderbilt is that, one, you try to take over a program that's pretty not good and see how fast you can turn it around, especially one that's going to have recruiting difficulties like Vanderbilt. Now, has he gotten a few good players in there? Absolutely. But as you've seen, a few good players doesn't necessarily equal wins. I mean, Mike Krzyzewski had quite a few good players this year. North Carolina had quite a few good players. Kentucky had a lot of good players. How many wins did that result in? It takes more than just getting a couple of good players and then snapping your fingers. Like really at Michigan, Juwan Howard didn't just have a trash team handed over to him. He's got a pretty good program there, and he didn't just turn it from, a 8-20 team to all of a sudden they're in the Final Four. So, to criticize him based on that, I think is short-sighted. If you look at Stackhouse's coaching career up to this point, he's been a very good assistant coach. He was the head coach of Raptors 905, the G League team for the Raptors, who were excellent. I think he's very good with a younger generation of players because even though he is aging, players still notice that, this is a guy that played at North Carolina. This is a guy that was an All-American. This is a guy that went into the league and dunked on, real dudes. And he was a high flyer at one point. I think that carries some weight. I do think he's a very good coach. I also think that the recruiting aspect at North Carolina and him being a former player and a star player, I think would help. And I think he'd get better players, and I think he could turn the program around and be fairly respectable. Having said all that, do I think he's going to be the next head coach? I do not. But I do think he'll definitely get a look. I talked about obviously the Steve Robinson potential there. Steve Robinson would basically kind of be like the Bill Guthridge pick. Like maybe you don't know the long-term thing yet, or maybe the long-term thing doesn't work out. Say they went after somebody and they just threw the bag at somebody and the coach was like, I don't know, I got a couple more years left. Maybe when the time comes, sure, you could turn the reins over to Steve Robinson. You've got continuity and comfortability in that pick. Nothing changes. He's been with Roy Williams for years. And there would be a certain amount of comfort in that pick. Now, is it the dynamic pick that people would want? No. But it would, like I said, be sort of that Bill Guthridge type pick where you're just kind of handing it off to the guy that's been right there. He knows the playbook. He knows what he's doing. He knows the Carolina way. I don't think that's what happens either. I kind of happen to think that whoever takes that job will be there for a long time unless they fall flat on their face. Now, the two most likely picks, I believe, are Hubert Davis and Wes Miller. The reasoning for that, one, because Hubert Davis has been there for, 9 years at this point?
Yeah, somebody say 10, but 9 or 10 probably.
He knows the ins and outs of the program. He's helped recruit a number of their top recruits over the last few years. I think Roy Williams has really been grooming him for that position, even if he didn't realize it was going to be coming this soon. And I think he's a guy who could potentially do a good job. I don't know. Wes Miller, I think, has proven himself as a head coach in the UNC Greensboro position. He's been very, very good. He's won no less than 21 games each of the last 5 seasons. If it wasn't for COVID, that number would have been higher this year probably. He had won no less than 23 games leading up to this season over the last 4 years. He's won 4 conference championships since 2012. He's getting his team to the NCAA tournament. He's a guy that is cut from that same vine as Roy Williams, is very classy. He's going to take all the blame. He's going to give all the credit to his players. He fits that sort of UNC mold. If I am Bubba Cunningham, if I'm the chancellor and I'm the athletic director and we're going out looking for a coach, in my mind, I think you throw the bag at the best coaches that there are out there. NBA, college, whatever. I think you go out there and say, hey, here's $8-9 million. We want you to come to the program. So, hey, Brad Stevens, come on down. Or, hey, Billy Donovan, come on down. Even if sure, you want to throw some money at Mark Few and ask him, fine. If you want to, try to get Tony Bennett, if you want to try to get Jay Wright, I think those are the guys you sort of go after first. You try to hit the home run first. And if the home run, if you can't hit a home run, then you lay down a bunt, or you get a little single through the infield or whatever. And that's not a slight to Wes Miller or to Hubert Davis, but as Bubba Cunningham said in his Zoom call, we all know who those great coaches are. We all know who the best coaches are in the NBA. We all know who the best coaches are in college basketball, and he said, I'm not trying to, pull the wool over anybody's eyes here. We all know who those coaches are. And in my mind, those are the guys you go after. I think those are the guys that you go after first and try to get. If those don't work out, and then you've got a great option from a coaching tree that is vast and talented, then I guess you don't do too bad on the rebound there. But in my mind, Mark Few, Tony Bennett, and Jay Wright are never coming. They've got great situations with far fewer expectations. Look, guys, Gonzaga at this point, in my mind, could probably win back-to-back titles. I think they're that good. I think the recruiting class next year is going to be tremendous, and I don't think they're really going to miss a step. And anybody that believes that they're only playing well because the conference they're in is out of their mind. Okay, this is a team that has proven itself over and over again. So I don't think Mark Few's ever leaving. Most UNC fans don't even want Tony Bennett, but I think he's an excellent coach. And Jay Wright, again, like I said, the expectations at Villanova are very, very low compared to how good of a coach he is. The expectation should probably actually be a lot higher because he gets terrific recruits and he's a terrific head coach. But I don't think those guys are coming.
Yeah, and so I'm glad you kind of mentioned what you would do, because that's where I was going to go next. I was going to make you go, be the AD and kind of give out your game plan. I agree. You gotta make the phone call to the Mark Few, Jay Wrights. Make them at least say no. I know Scott Drew has been thrown in there as well. Gotten Baylor up there again. He was mentioned with Indiana too, and it sounds like they tried those guys. Brad Stevens. They called him up. Jeff Goodman went and asked the question in a press conference about Indiana for Brad Stevens. It doesn't sound like that's really what he wants. I think again that's something you got to make the phone call and gauge his interest. There's been a little bit more talk with Brad Stevens and the Celtics not doing well, and could they fire him and him get back into college? I guess it's a possibility. You want to make sure that it's not, it's a for sure no from him, but I would see him staying in the NBA as well. Gil, you didn't want to have this talk. You didn't want to move on from Roy Williams just yet tonight. So you don't have to go into names if you don't want to, but I'll kind of throw it out there and you can take this and go where you want. But should we stay within North Carolina family? Is that priority? I know I saw a quote from Bubba said, it's something that we desire, or I don't know how he worded it, but it's not a necessity that it has to stay within the family. What's your kind of feelings there, or where do you want to go with this?
It's an interesting one in many ways because of the family tradition that's been cultivated and built for so long. But it's also, as Blake said, the number one, or maybe at worst the number 2 head coaching position in all of college basketball. And so you got to shoot for the stars, and aim to get the best candidate possible. You want the best coach there is. You want to bring national championships and Final Fours to Chapel Hill. Obviously, I could see it going either way, and you don't know, because there are people that will decline because they know the expectations, or they know kind of that oh, maybe they know a little bit of the history of how things went down with Matt Doherty and the transition being a little bumpy, and them trying to
So
bring
I'll
in.
stop you there. I was just thinking about that too. If we didn't have Matt Doherty in there, there's no way we go outside the family, right? But since people have seen what it looks like, there's some people that say, well, maybe we could go outside of it. You agree with that?
Yeah, and it's tough to establish what you want to establish. Um, like let's hypothesize for just a second. I'll play this game. Having honored Roy, of course. All right, say Tony Bennett, which I was probably one of the ringleaders of like many Tar Heel faithful that were like, no way, I do not want to see that style at all. But he's a dang good coach. And I think he's starting to prove that he can recruit pretty well too, and he'd be able to recruit even better at North Carolina. But who does he bring in? You know what I mean? That was the issue. Like, who's he bringing with him, and who's already here? You know what I mean? Like Deshaun May, the Kendall Marshall, and that whole, coaching staff. That was a big issue with Matt Doherty and that transition of Phil Ford and other coaches being kind of pushed to the side. So that's an interesting one on who outside of the family would come in and how that has to be worked out and negotiated with the AD and with the program. So that complicates things just a little bit, I think, if you are going after some of those big names that are outside of the family. I think the logical choice inside the family, again, if you don't do kind of the wise Steve Robinson for a short period of time, which I agree with Blake. I didn't foresee that. Hubert Davis was the first name I saw pop up, and the first one that I thought that seems like a fit. He's been doing, he's been groomed, like you said, for many years, and that was the way that Dean tried to do it, and that was the way that I would imagine that Roy, following in his mentor's footsteps, would try and do it. To be quite honest with you, so that's the one that I kind of see from within the family, and it makes a lot of sense. And the way I've seen Hubert carry himself, like when he's filled in, like the Roy Williams Live and whatnot, it's like I could see that. Like that's where I kind of envisioned this going. Now, I thought it was going to be a few years from now, but that's kind of where I saw this going. So those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, so my first thoughts this morning were, it's going to be Steve Robinson, kind of like you said, filling in the gap for until it's Hubert or until it's Wes Miller or something like that. Which, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, Bill Guthridge worked out. He went to 2 Final Fours in 3 years or something like that. I don't think he won a championship. I think we, nearly missed all those. But obviously, after that, then it kind of changed. And like you were kind of saying, Gil, it maybe has more to do with how Matt Doherty did it with the staff he brought in and stuff. And so, I don't know. It's crazy. We got to kind of wrap it up here. I think we've kind of hit this. I don't know that we're going to get much more decided here. We don't have Bubba Cunningham's cell number to kind of show him this video and what we think. But if you're laying money down, Blake, if you're a betting man and you're laying your house down on, I'll give you 3 names. What 3 names do you lay your house down on?
Hubert Davis, Wes Miller, and there's going to be some outside. There's going to be some outside force that has some play in this. But those 2 are 2 of the top 3 for sure. And let me say this too about Steve Robinson. This is happening somewhat in a similar fashion as Dean Smith and Bill Guthridge did. There had been talk at the end of Dean Smith's career about, is he getting close? Is he, what do we got? 1 more year, 2 more years, whatever. But when it happened, people were still surprised. They were very surprised. It took people off guard. And North Carolina didn't have anything in play for who's next. That's very much why Bill Guthridge took over. I would say that right now, the North Carolina coaching tree is in a better position, more well-groomed, and more ready to take over a potential head coaching position than at that point. At that point, it would have been pretty much like Larry Brown, George Karl, and a couple other names. Like right now, I think there are a number of guys. You could also talk about Jared Haas. Jared Haas is having some success at Stanford. He's actually been recruiting pretty well. I mean, not that it's hard to recruit at Stanford because a lot of kids will just go out there because it's beautiful, great weather. But imagine if he's recruiting well there, what he could do at North Carolina. I think he could do even better. But I think that Wes Miller is somebody who is very close to Roy Williams' heart. I think that's probably got to be pretty high up on Roy Williams' recommendation list, him and Hubert. But I don't think Bubba Cunningham wants to do this again in 2 or 3 years. And if it all works, which that's a big if, but if it all works and whoever they get has great success, and this doesn't have to happen for another 20 years, that's the goal. They know that's not going to happen with Steve Robinson. So Steve Robinson, in my mind, and all due respect to him, this isn't a knock on him, would be a worst case scenario, because that would just be a stopgap to the next hiring, which could be 2 or 3 years down the line. Steve Robinson's not a young dude anymore.
Right.
I think if you look at a guy like a Wes Miller or a Hubert Davis, you're thinking this is a long play. And if this works out, this could be 20, 30 years potentially. These are young guys. Again, though, I really do, with all due respect to those guys, because I think they could be very good coaches and it could turn out very well. I think you throw the bag at the best possible coaches out there with the most proven experience. Because right now, Hubert Davis doesn't have that. And Wes Miller's got a small sample size of it that we believe is pretty good. But we thought the same thing, again, to your points about Matt Doherty. And, not to say that he would turn out the same way, but for me, I like what I know about Brad Stevens. I like what I know about a Billy Donovan. Now, Billy Donovan, I think, has got a little bit more rope in Chicago right now than Brad Stevens has in Boston. The expectations in Boston are a lot higher, and Boston is playing terrible basketball. And Stephen A. Smith even said today that he thinks that Brad Stevens' job is really on the line. Apparently, and I didn't hear it for myself, but I've been seeing stuff online about it, there are radio hosts in Boston talking about Brad Stevens being so close to getting fired that he might as well just quit and take the UNC job. And that was just today. So I think there's definitely some Brad Stevens talk that's going to be in play there. But the top two for me would be Wes Miller and Hubert Davis in terms of likelihood.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys both kind of alluded to, Blake, you were talking about kind of the hitches, the problems that we would have with Hubert or Wes. The inexperience with Hubert not having led a program, with Wes, smaller or bigger sample size than Hubert, but still pretty smaller school. I know that worries people. They were saying he's got to go to a bigger job for a few years before Rory retires. Obviously, that can't happen now. There was a lot of talk with Juwan Howard and the job that he's doing. A lot of people giving that credit to the staff that he hired, and especially Phil Martelli from St. Joe's, having head coaching experience. Well, we have Steve Robinson there that could be that. He has head, he's been in the program, he's been in the family for so long, and he has head coaching experience. If we could get Hubert and have Steve Robinson, as long as he's willing to do that, that's the other thing we don't know, sitting here speculating, is we don't know if Hubert wants to be a head coach because he hasn't taken other jobs. And I think we kind of know why, but he hasn't come out and said, like, this is what I want for my life, is to be a head coach in college basketball. We don't know that Steve Robinson would want to be an assistant for someone else. We don't know those kind of things. So kind of coming here at the end here, Jorge says, what about the one coach from North Carolina Central?
Lavelle Moton. It's worth talking about. He's been very successful. He's very, very good. He's got youth on his side. He's got experience, with Chapel Hill and in the UNC basketball program. I absolutely think that they'll give him a look-see. I definitely think that he'll be in the conversation. I don't think ultimately that it'll be him. But hey, who knows?
I mean, he's kind of in this. I mean, I think he has more experience than Wes Miller. But as far as small school, the knocks on Wes are kind of the knocks on him. And obviously, Wes has the advantage of being an alum and one of Roy's players and stuff. So there's a lot more we could talk about. Roy Williams hinted at he's got some big time, or he wants some big time push and has some kind of people he wants to push to Bubba Cunningham. Bubba Cunningham said that Roy would be a part of the process. So again, a lot we could talk about there, but I don't think a lot more we're going to solve there. So I think this is about as good as any to.
Are you going to ask me if I'm a betting man?
Okay, you want that question? You didn't want it, so I wasn't going to throw it at you, but. You're throwing.
All right, I want it.
Three names.
I'm just tapping into something right here, intuition, and if I can have two names, well, I'll throw a third one out just to get a laugh. My wild card, Rasheed Wallace. How awesome would that be? Okay,
Be a lot of technicals. There'd be a
I
lot of technicals.
I hope
Yeah,
he's got a head
there'd be a lot of
assistant
passion,
ready to
right?
be a head coach.
All right, so I got two: Hubert Davis and Tony Bennett. I think that's the two that I could foresee. I'm just looking. I told you could read whatever Roy says and take it at face value, but I also think that sometimes he puts a little bit in there between the lines. Who did he talk about in his press conference? Just a little bit. He mentioned a handful of coaches, but he paused and he gave a little bit of extra, praise to Tony Bennett.
He did, but he
So-
mentioned Hubert, and people have
Yeah.
said that's why he brought him onto staff, was to groom him into the next coach. He mentioned
Yeah, and
Wes
he has
Miller.
been there, and he knows the players. So I think Hubert over Wes Miller. Even though Wes has the head coaching experience and Hubert doesn't, but Hubert has been in the program. He's been recruiting for that program. He knows the players already in the program, the staff, and the extended staff. So yeah, those are the two that I'm feeling. Yeah, Tar Heel and kicks. You're feeling me. Higher Sheed.
So, he also mentioned Wes Miller, and I saw a tweet that's in one of his press conferences. I don't know, somebody must have asked him what Wes Miller or what, I don't remember when it was from, but he was saying something along, should Wes Miller, go to a bigger school, or I don't know what the question was, but his answer was Wes Miller is already a big time coach, and he's going to be a big time coach in charge of a big time program real soon. And so of course people were like, oh, he's foreseeing him taking over North Carolina. But again, there's a lot of speculation. People were talking about, the players either staying or going because they knew this, but from everything that we've heard, that the players found out this morning. So it hasn't factored into their decisions. And so of course there's speculation of, will it affect more people going forward? Will more, leave or, whatever, when the next coach is hired, which again, we'll get into that stuff when we need to, but yeah, lots still to happen, and a lot of tables to be unturned, and things to be decided here. So we will be back. If you enjoyed this, obviously subscribe to YouTube, listen wherever. This will go out on all the podcast apps, so make sure you subscribe so that you get it once it's sent out there. And thanks for supporting the podcast, joining us in the conversation. Hopefully we're connected on social media. I got Blake and Gil's social medias, Twitter handles at least, in the description below. Make sure you're connected, and we're just trying to unite Tar Heel Nation here as we move forward. But with that said, until next time, go Heels.